What if I told you there was a civil war brewing within the One Piece world government?
You just started a war.
Two opposing sides being the celestial dragons who pull the strings from the shadows and their natural enemy, the hero of the Marines, Monkey D. Garp. Today we will discuss what Sword is, why Monkey D. Garp is the leader of this mysterious secret faction, and by the end, everything will come full circle as I tell you why a civil war is inevitable within the near future of the One Piece story. But first, make sure you like the video as it really goes a long way to help support the channel and boost these videos in the algorithm. Now, let's start out with everything we already know about Sword. Sword is a secret faction within the world government, a special force operation. During Wano, it is revealed that X Drake is a prominent member as he is infiltrating Wano with a mission that includes joining the leader of the Beast Pirates, Emperor Kaido. It was revealed that X Drake's true loyalty still remains to Sword and the world government, a marine undercover in disguise as a pirate. We even get to see him at the start of the new world intentionally going after Kaido, which proves this was part of his mission all along. And trust me, there is so much to dive into when it comes to X Drake, including his relationship with Law. But first, the other prominent member revealed to be in Sword so far was Coby. And one thing that I love when it comes to Coby being in Sword is the possibility of foreshadowing for him being an undercover spy by Oda 900 chapters before. All the way back in chapter 7, there is a scene where we see Luffy punch Coby after they defeated Axe-Hand Morgan. And Luffy does this so the Marines don't affiliate Coby as a pirate. But the Marines still have their suspicions as Coby is begging for a chance to join. A Marine says, "Lieutenant, I don't think it's a good idea. Pirates have been known to plant spies in the Marines." Now you might say this is a possible foreshadowing to Virgo or Corazon, but the way I look at it is Coby was the very first character that Luffy meets on his journey. So I really do think Oda has always had an endgame plan for Coby in some way. And with him now being revealed to be in Sword, being tied to Garp and Luffy, it's a very suspicious coincidence that Coby actually did end up being an undercover spy for the world government. Another interesting detail is the two sides of the same coin phenomena that Oda loves so much. In this case, we can notice a very intriguing detail during the conversation between Coby and Drake. And Drake was shocked to learn that CP0 was actually dealing with Kaido and Orochi, and in this case, Coby mentions that he doesn't like the implications of this, and all of this in turn implies that CP0 is a secret faction directly tied to the Celestial Dragons and a rival faction of Sword. The wordplay here is also deep because Sword is self-explanatory, however the full name for CP0 is Cypher Poe Aegis 0, with Aegis also being a symbol for shield. So Sword versus Shield is a direct opposition of two secret organizations within the world government. In Water 7, we find out about how CP9 was a rumor. Its existence was always questioned by not only the world, but even in the government, it's a very secretive force. And the same rules go for Sword. And just like the natural enemy of a shield is a sword, the natural enemy of the gods is the will of D. So this leads me to my next point. The true leader of Sword is actually Monkey D. Garp. Garp having the will of D puts him in an interesting position as far as the hero of the Marines. He turned down the role of an admiral specifically because his disgust for the Celestial Dragons. He was so against working directly under them, and this ties into his nature of the will of D. Garp is a free spirit and a lot like Luffy, and so why else do I think Garp is the perfect candidate for the leader of an anti-Celestial Dragon aside from his hatred? And Garp might seem careless at times, and he seems like a guy who will spill these secrets without even mentioning it or realizing it, but you gotta remember that he also had ties to Goldie Roger and even kept Ace hidden from the world. We see Garp in certain intentions and very interesting thoughts like the fact that he can never come to hate Goldie Roger. And whatever happened at God Valley, I believe that this was the day that Garp realized that he had to make a change. If you remember, Monkey D. Dragon and Koala state that the world government is not their enemy, it's specifically the Celestial Dragon. And this might be a very similar mentality that Garp has as a prominent member of the Marines. Now finally, with Coby being so young and already being revealed as a member of Sword, showing the knowledge of CP0 alongside being in contact with a captain like Drake, many fans have already suggested this as more evidence to the idea that Garp has deep ties to Sword. After all, it was Garp who trained Coby in the very beginning of the story. Now aside from Coby, Garp is also tied to Sengoku. Now believe me, we will get to Sengoku, but for now let's focus on Garp and his right hand man. For the longest time, I have completely overlooked this character, but remember how I mentioned the situation with Coby earlier and how he was foreshadowed to be a spy? Well, what a coincidence that Coby is tied to Garp, and Garp trained with Coby, drastically getting him into shape. But there was one other man who was one of the most mysterious characters in the entire series, and someone who was also responsible for training Coby, and that is Garp's right-hand man who we've almost seen nothing about, and his name is Bogard. In my eyes, it's like, what a coincidence, because what are the chances that Coby runs into this guy who looks like the closest thing to a detective or a spy that we will ever see in One Piece. He's a shady figure with the overhead hat to hide his eyes, he rarely speaks and rarely appears in a manga aside from a few cover stories and in Water 7 briefly, and he also has that beige shoe underneath his marine's attire. Everything about this character screams detective, undercover spy, and being connected to Garp as a right-hand man. He's the very opposite, with Garp being a loud, obnoxious, and speaking his mind at all times. Bogard is much more quiet and calculated. He's the one who recommends to tell Sengoku that Luffy simply managed to escape and get away, instead of Garp admitting that he allowed him to escape because it's his grandson. Garp being the most important marine in the story as the hero and the grandfather of Luffy, I think it's fair to raise suspicions of his right-hand man who has earned his respect in some way, and it's very likely that Bogard, Coby, and Garp combined to create the greatest crew within the Sword Secret Forces. And now let's move into the next member, Trafalgar D. Waterloo. But before that, if you did enjoy the video so far, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe and hit that bell like Luffy and Skypiea. Now, when it comes to Law, he is a very popular character, and I have to say one of my favorite theories within the community has always been the Randy Choi Law theory, where he states that Law is actually a member of Sword. And while I disagree with a few points he made here and there, I agree with the main point that he brings up, and I will leave a link to his video in the description as I will be stating many of the points that he's already made. Randy points out that Law does hate pirates. He has a preconceived idea of what a pirate is, as we see him disgusted by Luffy and Zoro when he finds out that they stole the food and gave it to the starving village in Wano. And this is stealing and a very piratey action, of course, but Law says, pirates doing nice things for people, it makes me sick, reinforcing the time when Luffy and Law joined in Punk Hazard as they saved the children. And I would also like to add just how secretive Law really is. He leaves his crew for a decent amount of time to go to Punk Hazard, and he has a very tragic backstory, being influenced by Corazon after being groomed by Doflamingo's family in criminal activity. It's no wonder why he would have the prejudice against pirates after Doflamingo kills his own brother for infiltrating and hiding secrets as an undercover marine who turned on him. Inheriting the will of Corazon, is very possible that Corazon himself was a member of Sword in the past, and he specifically opposed the Celestial Dragon's insane lifestyle and corrupt power. Pirates directly oppose a marine to its core in the way of standing proud as a criminal when they raise their Jolly Roger. The big difference is the focus of freedom versus justice, but we can still see that even Garp respected Roger and couldn't come to hate him, and we might be seeing a similar situation between Luffy and Law. We have two Will of D members, we have Garp and Roger defeating the Rocks pirates, and we have Luffy and Law defeating Kaido and Big Mom, who are remnants, former members of the Rocks crew. In a sense, history did repeat itself, and Sengoku and Garp hint at this, with Sengoku stating that you must know your history to predict the future when bringing up Wano and the Rocks pirates. And Randy Choi points out that Law always planned to go after Kaido, and he also points out his relationship with X Drake. The very first time we see X Drake and Sabaody, we see him interfering with a clash between two pirates. As for Law, his introduction is shown with him smiling as he makes small talk with X Drake passing by. And this would be insane foreshadowing for Oda to show us in the very first introduction that Law is connected to Drake and knows him personally in his first interaction at Sabaody. In chapter 954, we see a scene where Law is captured by Hawkins, but he ultimately escapes. And you can see once again, maybe Drake and Law do have a history of sorts, and that Drake was the one who helped free Law. A shady figure is shown as Law says, if letting me walk free is all part of your plot, then consider me a willing participant. Furthermore, insinuating that Law is part of the shady figure's overarching plot, with Drake being captain and infiltrating Kaido's forces since day one of the New World. You can see why this theory to this day still holds up. If we look ahead once again, we see Drake ultimately clash with CP0 in a fated encounter, and then in chapter 1052, when the raid is finally fully over, Hawkins is shown with Drake asking him if he's a marine right before he apparently dies. Finally, did you know that Drake is actually shown in Law's flashback during the moment where Corazon dies? Now, since with Law, Randy Choi brings up that he inherited the will of Corazon, an undercover marine posing as a pirate, it makes you wonder, what about the will that Corazon inherited from the beginning? And this is one of the points that I disagree personally with, because unlike Randy, I actually believe that Sengoku is tied to Sword as one of the founders with Garp, and this will matter towards the end when we discuss other characters players that I believe are in Sword, specifically Tsuru and Kuzan. If you look at Sengoku, he's always being tied to Garp in some way, shape, or form. If Garp is one of those founders of Sword, then we can look at Sengoku, who also has plenty of information within the government, being a more intellectual character as well. With Sengoku and Garp retiring around the same time, it makes you wonder, what about their endgame role and what will it be? Well, with them retiring after Marineford, it will give them time to focus on their true passion project known as Sword, with the final war coming close. And Whitebeard declaring the prophetic final war nearing, is Sengoku who he says is afraid of this. And this might have been the moment when he realized that he wanted to put all his energy onto being on the right side of history, because we're talking about the man at the highest level of the Marines, someone who knows the corruption of the government firsthand. As the fleet admiral and not being able to fully command their army, Sengoku might have wanted to create a sword with Garp after reaching for the top and discovering the truth. We know that Sengoku specifically referred Kuzan for the position of fleet admiral, and once again we will get into Kuzan, but this might hint at him being against someone like Sakazuki and the Godosei and the absolute justice extremism. Now the final straw for Sengoku was when Impel Down was covered up, when the Godosei ordered to hide the events of the level 6 prisoners breaking out. When Blackbeard freed some of the most powerful criminals the world has ever seen, this was something that Sengoku wanted to warn the world about, but instead the Godosei preferred not to risk the perception of fear throughout the world over their safety. And so now these two veterans are retired and getting more in touch with Sword now that they have the time, especially with Sengoku not being the fleet admiral anymore. We know how busy it could be. I could definitely see a scenario where he actually decided it was time to now take over the Godosei. We know that Law inherited Corazon's will, but if we take that one step further, Corazon inherited Sengoku's will. He knows more than meets the eye when it comes to the will of D, and he even brings up the checkered fate. Garp, a will of D member, a long life friend and colleague, is someone who can irritate him, but at the end of the day, Garp and Sengoku look out for each other. It makes more sense to me that Garp, who is known for sleeping on the clock, napping at random times, is working a side job as the main leader of this operation. If you remember Denjiro, who was known for falling asleep mid-conversation, he too was living that double lifestyle, essentially infiltrating as a close ally to Orochi, only playing his trump card undercover persona during the raid. And then we have Garp, who was introduced in the cover stories shown falling asleep mid-conversation as Axe-Hand Morgan actually manages to land a blow on the legendary hero of the Marine. And that leads me to think, why is the man who always seems to be the freest and always seems to do whatever he wants always so tired? Well, you let me know if you agree with this observation. Now, when Whitebeard claims that Sengoku specifically is afraid of the man who will carry on the will of the past generations and launch the final war, I believe this is a prophesized war that Sengoku, Whitebeard, Garp, many of the legends of the world know about, like even Kaido, Dragon, and Shanks. Sengoku may have been so conflicted as he heard from the Godosei that this war would destroy the entire world. As Sengoku's faith in these false gods continues to falter, he might have begun to understand that maybe destroying this corrupt world would not be such a bad thing after all. Now, my final point for Sengoku being in Sword actually relates to Kuzan. And once again guys, like the video if you have not already. Aokiji Kuzan is a key part of this theory, because he is recommended by Sengoku specifically, and I'm also guessing by Garp, for the position of the fleet admiral as Sengoku steps down. This is extremely important when we consider the idea that Sengoku wanted him to continue the legacy of the Marines and point them in the right direction, while at the same time handing it over to someone that he trusts with a moral code and a strong sense of justice and a strong will. Interestingly enough, with Kuzan being so lazy, he turns this offer down, similar to how Garp, who he looks up to, refuses the offer of becoming an admiral, and Kuzan only steps up to the promotion when he realizes that Sakazuki is a violent and insane choice for the fleet admiral. This results in a legendary battle between the two, and eventually he loses and ends up leaving the Marines. He is now affiliated with Blackbeard, and the rest is history. Or is it? What if I told you that there is actually a lot more to this story? Similar to how Drake has been infiltrating Kaido, Kuzan is someone who looks up to Garp the most. Garp and Sengoku may have grabbed him to the side and said, listen, we're retiring, you're retiring, but there's another way we can counter the corruption at the top. Kuzan always followed in Garp's footsteps, and he trusts this man in his sense of justice, with Garp holding a personal grudge towards Sakazuki for killing Ace, and Sakazuki always being a clashing nature and opposing force to Kuzan. Thematically, ideologically, and narratively, Kuzan becomes a very interesting candidate for Sword if he is joining forces with Garp. Kuzan is a character who we have seen come to think deeply about the morality of certain events like the Buster Call, and where he makes a clear distinction that he is going against the slaughter of the innocent civilian lives. Another interesting detail is that Oda goes out of his way to point out that at some point Kuzan owed Garp for helping him in the past. What if Garp helped Kuzan after all hard to regain his faith in the Marines? After all, Kuzan's justice was shaken up to the core, changing his entire point of view. In Water 7, when he finally confronts Nico Robin, he is willing to go behind the scenes, break a few rules, and even help out some of the most sought out criminals. I believe Garp reassured Kuzan with his end goal dream being to take down the Celestial Dragons by using sword as a way to maintain a Marine and still believe in morality of doing the right thing above all. Kuzan is very mysteriously showing up to Punk Hazard, and this calls into question why was he actually there. Randy Troy also brought up in his video the possibility that Kuzan was going to meet with Law or discuss a private sword related matter, and this Law Kuzan meeting actually does make some sense because Smoker is shocked to see Kuzan at Punk Hazard and asks how he knew that he was there. It's possible that Law got information out to Sword that Smoker was at Punk Hazard, either that or Kuzan is lying about going there to see him, and then it still makes you question why he showed up in the first place, which in this case was once again to see Law. With Law having black market connections to Caesar and Doflamingo before taking them down, I find it interesting to wonder if Kuzan also has connections of his own with Dragon, Blackbeard, or someone else entirely. I would also like to add how perfect Kuzan is to use as a transporter of information. Without a ship, he travels around the Grand Line on a bike by himself, and if he brings information to someone like Sword, he will not be intercepted through a snail. And at the very end of the Punk Hazard arc, Kuzan leaves and tells everyone to keep it a secret that he showed up. Again, very suspicious. And this interaction between Kuzan and Smoker shows that he's still cool with the government, but he's very secretive about the way that he moves. Now let's move on to Tsuru. Personally, I don't believe that you can separate Garp, Sengoku, and Tsuru. So if you believe that two of them are in Sword, I think you have to throw in the other one. Sudo could also be the third and final original founder alongside her close friends. They're all so close in fact that Garp and Sengoku are the only ones to call her Sudo-chan. And during Marine 4, we see the three of them are sitting at the top analyzing the battle. Sudo is all about clean justice. She's knowledgeable and possibly the most intelligent of the three. And all I know is that great cleansings might sound clean, but in reality they might be the dirtiest little secret that the government is trying to hide. Sudo, after learning about these certain taboos from Garp, Sengoku, maybe from the rocks incident, may have come to the conclusion that the Gorosei must be overthrown. Luckily, having such powerful allies that she trusts and having the ambition to see this vision come through places her perfectly as a main member of the secret faction opposing CP0. First, we see her long history with Doflamingo, and for years Tsuru was going back and forth facing off against his criminal family. There seems to be somewhat of a feuding respect between the two, with Doflamingo stating that he can never best her, and you can imagine how frustrated she may have been all this time with Doflamingo becoming a warlord. At this point, their history is put to rest. With Sudo being a part of Sword though, it could explain why she is still so adamant when going after a former Celestial Dragon and a criminal mastermind. Remember that CP0 was involved at Dressrosa, and they were also in deals when it comes to the weapons. And the Celestial Dragons also keeping their distance from Doflamingo, with him having leverage over them could have been another interesting detail, because Sudo shows that she disagrees with the corruption of the Gorosei and Doflamingo going hand in hand, but you could tell that she was always planning on taking him down up until the very end of Dressrosa. Now, I know many have speculated that Fujitora is also a part of Sword, and while it's possible, I do have to disagree. Although when it comes to the final war, similarly to Smoker, Fujitora could potentially ally with Sword or join the organization in the near future. Now, this all leads to why is this so important? Well, what if I told you that we are close to witnessing a civil war within the world government? Two covert operations will eventually come head to head, being Sword and CP0, and everyone on the outside will eventually have to pick a side. Garp leading one force, the hero of the Marines, the man who so many respect around the world, versus the almighty fearsome rule of the world government and their very source of corruption, the Gorosei teaming up with Akainu. The Will of D versus the Celestial Dragons, Akainu versus Aokiji, and many more battles as well. Vegapunk, SSG, Kizaru, and Green Bull will most likely side Sawa Akainu, while Fujitora, Smoker, Tashigi could choose to stand by Garp's side, as you will need these people to pick a side so many of the fodder marines can join as well. And the other way this could begin is the culmination of this entire organization being to stage a coup, overthrowing the political power at the top. If you look at Garp, who was in some way tied to another powerful leader with his eyes on destroying the celestial dragons, we have Monkey D. Dragon. Dragon is not necessarily opposed to the entire government as a whole. He understands that there are potential good-hearted allies like Garp and Sudo within the organization, and he also might know that they are holding back their true motives and feelings, waiting for this final day to come. With Luffy leading one side of the pirate alliance, Garp going in from the inside of the government, and Monkey D. Dragon gathering islands from around the world, you have a powerful potential alliance at the very end of the series. And remember, it's not just a potential sword. Members like Sudo, Lost, and Goku at Dressrosa, you also have Sabo, Koala, and Hag keeping an eye out for CP0. Why is it that Sword is so concerned with CP0 making the under-the-table black market deals with Kaido and Orochi? Well, it's a sign of their enemies stocking up on powerful weapons, preparing for the inevitable clash of ideology. Coby says that he does not like the implications because it shows how far CP0 is willing to go to strap up and get ready for the final war. Kuzan is also questioned about his black market affiliation, but he does not reply, and maybe Kuzan is also tied to the black market in a similar way the CP0 agents at Wano are, to prepare for war by acquiring weapons in secrecy. Another important question to ask is, how does a civil war start? And the reality is that there are many signs of potential civil wars. A difference in ideology and morality, and more importantly, fear on the Godosei side. The celestial dragons have ruled for centuries, destroying and revising history, committing great cleansings and commanding from the shadows, maintaining power and balance. This is why the Whitebeard quote before his death is actually so important, bringing up the fear the world government has for an even bigger war after the One Piece is found. In chapter 908, we see one of the Godosei state that the world equilibrium cannot be maintained forever. The time has come for a great cleansing. And with this, they're essentially saying, we've been trying to pretend to be the nice guys this entire time, but it's really about to get wicked, so it's time to show how nasty we can get. It's starting to seem like the Godosei are beginning to actually become fearful of losing their balance of the world and the power that they have maintained for so long. Another sign of potential civil war is, like I mentioned earlier, with the ambition from Garp, Sengoku, Sudo, Aokiji, and many others to change this system from the inside. They have witnessed more than everyone how corrupt it can truly be, knowing secrets that not many in the outside world could even process. And these members could potentially expose everything. What they stand against is to change who calls the shots, removing the celestial dragons from power, and who better than Garp, Sengoku, and Kuzan to bring other marines who look up to them and realize that these people are fighting for true justice. Garp still plans to keep an eye on the Yonko as well, because once the civil war begins, other powerful pirates with fleets and military might can see it as an opportunity to overthrow the government altogether. So let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with in the comments. Subscribe if you did enjoy the theory, and click on one of these two videos to continue the journey to help us uncover the One Piece world's biggest mysteries.